as there are for women. That in fact, out of the approximately 981 characters in Shakespeare, 826 of them are men. Now, of course, we have to qualify that a little bit because, there's all the soldiers and servants and all of these men that are around all the time. But we have 155 women who we remember. They are so rich, they're so much alive that we remember them. But that means that there's only 16% of the characters who are women. That's not very many. Well, where did the ideas for these women come from? For Shakespeare, in his day, it was very common for playwrights and other artists as well to look at the works that had been recovered during the Renaissance from the ancient Greeks and Romans. In particular, Shakespeare drew on Ovid. He drew on the North translation of Plutarch's Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. And of course, he drew on the playwrights, Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, and he found characters like Clytemnestra and Medea and Antigone, these wonderfully rich women in those plays. And that was an inspiration for him. Even though the number of female characters is relatively low, they are all remarkable. And part of that is because Shakespeare gives a sense of respect to them. Even the comic characters and the tragic characters who are evil in some cases, like Lady Macbeth, for instance. There's a sense of respect because he gives reasons for why they do what they do, just as he does for the men characters who are evil, villainous kinds of characters. But the second-tier characters in Shakespeare are just as remarkable as the main characters. And we think of characters like Calpurnia, for instance, in Julius Caesar, Brutus's wife, who swallows hot embers in order to commit suicide when she finds out that Brutus is not going to come back. And Portia, Julius Caesar's wife, who has dreams and prophecies, and she warns him, don't go to the capital. But he doesn't listen, and he goes. And then there's Mistress Quickly, one of my favorite characters, the memorable hostess of the Boar's Head Tavern in the Henry plays and in Merry Wives of Windsor. But all of these subsidiary characters, these second-tier characters, bring importance to the plays, they bring substance, and they bring significant contributions to the plays as well. So tonight I'm going to talk about three of these women. The nurse in Romeo and Juliet, Emilia in Othello, and Paulina in The Winter's Tale. Although there's no mention of the nurse in Ovid's telling of the Babylonian story of Pyramus and Thisbe, which is thought to be one of the sources that Shakespeare drew on, and that we're familiar with from the Mechanicals play at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream, the main source that Shakespeare drew on was the tragical history of Romeus and Juliet, written in Italian by Bandello and translated in 1562 by Arthur Brooke, does include the nurse. In Brooke's poem, however, she's punished by banishment for her assistance in seeing the lovers wedded and bedded. Shakespeare, however, doesn't allude to any such punishment except in a kind of offhand remark that the prince makes at the very end when he says, "Some shall be pardoned, some punish it." That's all he says, and that's the end of it. Shakespeare, instead, keen dramatist that he is, keeps the focus on the lovers, the tragedy of the lovers, and the feud that is responsible for the tragedy. The nurse, as Shakespeare presents her, is a comic character. She's very funny. She has lots of qualities that make her stand out because of her humor. The very first time we see her, she's in a conversation with Lady Capulet and Juliet and trying to figure out Juliet's age. And one of the things that she remembers is an earthquake that happened 11 years sooner, when Juliet was just a baby, toddler. She comes in this time. And so she has this to say. And since that time it is 11 years, for then she could stay in how long? Nay, by the rood, she could have run and waddled all about. For even the day before she broke her brow. And then my husband, God rest his soul, it was a merry man, took up the child. Yea, quoth he, dost thou fall upon thy face? Thou wilt fall backward when thou hast more wit. Wilt thou not, Jewel? And by my halidam, the pretty wretch left off crying and said, aye. To see how a jest will come about. I warrant, and I should live 1,000 years, I never should forget it. Wilt thou not, Jewel? Quoth he. And pretty fool, it stinted and said, aye. She has known Juliet since the girl was born and has served as her guide and confidant through years. In the play, she has reached old age, having raised her own daughter, who's apparently died, and then Juliet prior to the start of the action. Her age, like Falstaff's in Merry Wives, offers Shakespeare some fuel for comedy. She babbles, she exaggerates, she teases lewdly, as we saw in that passage. She pretends bodily ailments and shortness of breath. She scolds the young men who mock her. She delights in having a major role to play in Juliet's life, and she demonstrates a weakness of intellect, all of which enable humor. When she is sent out by Juliet to get the message from Romeo about whether or not he's serious about marrying her, she comes back and teases Juliet by being very slow in giving her response, and also because she doesn't praise Romeo, or seems not to, although in a backhanded way she is. Well, you have made a simple choice. You know not how to choose a man. Romeo? No, not he. Though his face be better than any man's, yet his leg excels all men's. And for a hand and a foot and a body, though they be not talked on, yet they are past compare. He is not the flower of courtesy, but I'll warrant him as gentle as a lily. Lord, how my head aches! What a head I have! It beats as it would fall in 20 pieces. My back, the other side, on my back. Beshrew your heart for sending me about to catch my death with jouncing up and down. Later, she has no moral qualms about encouraging Juliet to take a second husband, thinking only of the prudent choice that will avoid harsh repercussions. After Juliet has been ordered to marry Paris by her parents, she begs comfort from the nurse, who knows she has already married Romeo, but says, faith, here 'tis. Romeo is banished, and all the world to nothing, that he dares ne'er come back to challenge you. Or if you do, it needs must be by stealth. Since then the case so stands as now it doth, I think it best you married with the county. Oh, he's a lovely gentleman. Romeo's a dishcloth to him. An eagle, madam, hath not so green, so quick, so fair an eye as Paris hath. Beshrew my very heart, I think you are happy in this second match, for it excels your first. Or if you do not, your first is dead, or 'twere as good he were as living here and you no use of him. Her loyalties shift quickly between the Capulet family, Juliet, and herself. She is easily persuaded by those she believes smarter than herself, for example, the friar. Even Mercutio's ribald jesting has a dark and ominous edge. His humor is sarcastic and ironic, and so deliberately meant to entertain and to call attention to himself, while hers is completely unself-conscious. She's funny without knowing it. The contrast between her zaniness and others' seriousness in several scenes gives those scenes depth and realism. In short, the nurse gives comic, amoral outspokenness to the play that contrasts sharply with the seriousness found elsewhere. Amelia is in a similar relationship to Desdemona, though she is a lady-in-waiting, not a nurse. She serves as a confidant to Desdemona, though like the nurse, she does not receive her lady's deepest thoughts when she seems to disappoint with her moral laxity. As Iago's spouse, however, she practices a wifely submission that dooms her lady. That submission gradually disintegrates with signs of its erosion already at her first appearance. The character's origin is traced to the 1565 tale On Capitano Moro from Giovanni Battista Giraldi Cintio's Gli Hecatomiti, Shakespeare's principal source for the play. In Cintio's tale, however, Amelia is an unnamed character, but therein it is she who survives the tragedies and who reports the tale. Unlike the nurse, Amelia is not a comic character. In fact, she sometimes seems rather sour, especially when talking with or about Iago. Like the nurse, though, she acts as a go-between for Cassio, who wants to plead with Desdemona to speak on his behalf, following Othello's rejection of him as a consequence of his drunken brawl with Montano. This pleading, of course, conveniently plays into Iago's scheme to make Othello jealous of Cassio. It is Amelia, however, who most enables Iago's devilry to succeed when she presents him with Desdemona's handkerchief. She seems to sense that Iago's intentions are not good and wants to reclaim the handkerchief, but he dismisses her before she can retrieve it from him. When she first finds it, she says, "I'm glad I found this napkin. This was her first remembrance from the moor. My wayward husband hath 100 times wooed me to steal it. But she so loves the token, for he conjured her she should ever keep it, that she reserves it evermore about her to kiss and talk to. I'll have the work taken out and give it Iago. What he will do with it, heaven knows, not I nothing but to please his fantasy." Belief in the role of a submissive wife makes her susceptible to Iago's manipulation. So deep is this sense of loyalty to Iago that she actually lies to Desdemona when the latter wonders what has happened to her handkerchief, just before Othello angrily demands it of her, even while Amelia watches in silence. Apart from this crucial incident, Amelia's role remains somewhat minimal until the end of the play. Amelia speaks loyally of Desdemona to Othello when he asks her about her observations of Cassio talking with his wife, even though Othello dismisses her words as insignificant. She says, "I durst, my lord, to wager she is honest. lay down my soul at stake. If you think other, remove your thought. It doth abuse your bosom. If any wretch have put this in your head, let heaven requite it with the serpent's curse. For if she be not honest, chaste, and true, there's no man happy. The purest of their wives is foul as slander. Amelia, with great irony, describes Iago's villainy precisely, though she has yet to realize it is her own husband who fits the mold. Amelia continues to grow in understanding and speaks the truth even when she is blind to its meanings. I will be hanged if some eternal villain, some busy and insinuating rogue, some cogging, cousining slave to get some office have not devised this slander. I'll be hanged else. The more's abused by some most villainous knave, some base, notorious knave, some scurvy fellow. It is Amelia who attends Desdemona and listens to her willow song on the night of the murder. And in that conversation between Amelia and Desdemona, the difference in Amelia's and Desdemona's morality and worldview appears when Desdemona wonders if Amelia would do such a deed for all the world, that is, commit adultery. And here it's interesting to note that Desdemona's view is very idealistic, whereas Amelia's is very down to earth and very practical. Desdemona speaks in verse, the proper language of the upper class and of those who have the idealistic view of the world, while Amelia speaks in prose, the language of the lower class characters and those who do not maintain that idealistic view. She says, "In troth, I think I should commit adultery, and I'd do it when I'd have done it. Mary, I would not do such a thing for a joint ring, nor caps, nor any petty exhibition, but for all the world? It's pity. Who would not make her husband a cuckold to make him a monarch? I should venture purgatory for it. Why, the wrong is but a wrong in the world, and having the world for your labor, 'tis a wrong in your own world, and you might quickly make it right." It sounds like some of the politicians we know. Like Shylock, Amelia defends her kind, that is, women, in words much like Shylock's. She says, "But I do think it is their husbands' faults if wives do fault. Let husbands know their wives have sense like them. They see and smell and have their palates both for sweet and sour, as husbands have. What is it that they do when they change us for others? Is it sport? I think it is. And doth affection breed it? I think it doth. Is it frailty that thus errs? It is so too. And have not we affections, desires for sport, and frailty as men have? Then let them use us well, else let them know the ills we do, their ills instruct us to." In the end, it is Amelia who stands by her mistress when Othello insists she is untrue. The shock of Othello's revelation about Iago's false stories breaks Amelia out of her loyalty to her husband and her willing blindness to his deeds. She denounces Iago and Othello publicly, showing bravery and her devotion to Desdemona. The truth comes clear to Amelia in the last scene following Othello's murder of his wife. "Villainy, villainy, villainy! I think upon it, I think I smell it all, villainy! I thought so then. I'll kill myself for grief. Oh, villainy, villainy! 'Twill out, 'twill out. I peace? No, I will speak as liberal as the North. Let heaven and men and devils Let them all cry shame against me, yet I'll speak. She pays for her honesty with her life when Iago stabs her for betraying him. Of all the characters in the play, Amelia finally shows the greatest integrity, bravery, and crushing regret. At heart, she is always a good woman. In The Winter's Tale, Paulina, too, is a good woman who must defend her lady, Hermione, and denounce her lord, Leontes, the king of Sicily. Unlike Amelia, though, Paulina sees all clearly right from the start and manipulates events to ensure an eventual happy ending. The Winter's Tale is based on the popular story Pandosto, written by Robert Greene and published in 1588, which ended with the king's suicide and did not include the character of Paulina, a purely Shakespearean invention. Leontes' rejection of Hermione, like Othello's of Desdemona, and indirectly of Juliet by her parents, is based on jealousy. But here it leads to resurrection and reconciliation, unlike either the source material or either of these other plays. Paulina's early efforts to quash Leontes' rage only serves to infuriate him further. As the wife of Antigonus, a lord in Leontes' court, Paulina holds a higher status than Iago's Amelia. Thus, her prophecies and proclamations carry more weight. Moreover, she and Antigonus are one in their understanding of Hermione's innocence. Leontes, though, refuses to hear them. Paulina speaks forthrightly and doesn't pull any punches with Leontes, who lambasts her with his insults and tyrannical commands when she brings the newborn princess to him. She appears in Act 2 as an advocate of the queen, who has been imprisoned and has given birth to a girl that Paulina determines to show Leontes in hopes of warming his heart. "It is yours. Behold, my lords, although the print be little, the whole matter and copy of the father. Eye, nose, lip, the trick of his frown, his forehead, nay, the valley, the pretty dimples of his chin and cheek, his smiles, the very mold and frame of hand, nail, finger. And thou, goddess nature, which hast made it so like to him that got it, if thou hast the ordering of the mind too, amongst all colors, no yellow in it, lest she suspect, as he does, her children, not her husband's." Antigonus, who is sworn to obey Leontes, is charged with taking the baby to some remote and desert place to leave it to its fate. Reluctantly, he does so, landing in Bohemia, where, having placed the child on the unsheltered land, he dies, as his dream predicted, being killed by a bear. One of the most famous stage directions in all theater. Exit Antigonus, pursued by a bear. Back in Sicily, following the revelation of the oracle which condemns Leontes, in turn condemnation of it as false, the news of his son Amelius' death, and Leontes' repentance as a result of that death, Paulina, hearing of Leontes' repentance, brings word that Hermione has died and accuses Leontes of crimes immeasurable. "O thou tyrant, do not repent these things, for they are heavier than all thy woes can stir. Therefore betake thee to nothing but despair. 1,000 knees, 10,000 years together, naked, fasting upon a barren mountain, and still winter in storm perpetual, could not move the gods to look the way thou wert. Together, Leontes and Paulina enter upon a 16-year period of mourning, in which Paulina monitors the king's penitence, making sure he remembers and atones for his cruelty. When, after 16 years, Polixenes, the close friend whom Leontes had accused of unfaithfulness with his wife, returns to Sicily in pursuit of his son and Leontes' daughter, Perdita, who has survived. It is Paulina who directs the final outcome. She demonstrates her practice of browbeating Leontes about his guilt, discouraging him from his courtiers' pleas that he remarry, and making him promise that he will never marry without her consent. Shakespeare then has the pivotal scenes of reconciliation between Leontes and Polixenes, the discovery of Perdita's true identity, and the blessing of Florizel and Perdita's love, all reported by a gentleman. These great scenes reported by a gentleman instead of acted on the stage. This enables the presentation of Hermione's statue to receive greater dramatic weight. Paulina draws the curtain and shows the statue. As she lived peerless, so her dead likeness, I do well believe, excels whate'er yet you looked upon, or hand of man hath done. Paulina claims to possess the power to bring the remarkable statue to life. The scene is fraught with tension and wonder as music sounds and the statue moves. When it stirs, the shock is extraordinary, both for the onstage characters and for an unknowing theater audience. Paulina says, "Music, awake her, strike. 'Tis time, descend, be stone no more. Approach, strike all that look upon with marvel. Come, I'll fill your grave up. Stir, nay, come away. Bequeath to death your numbness. For from him dear life redeems you. You perceive, she stirs." In this dramatic moment, Paulina becomes godlike as she seems to work a spell. But it turns out Hermione, with Paulina's help, has preserved herself to see the outcome of the oracle's prophecy. For her goodness, Paulina is rewarded with a companion for her age, a new husband to comfort her. Paulina is the moral force in Winter's Tale, speaking truth throughout the play and dispensing justice and reconciliation. As these three characters indicate, Shakespeare's skill in portraying subsidiary female characters grows over the years. He took the hints and vague allusions to characters in his sources and gave them flesh and blood, or as in Paulina's case, created them from nothing. But what is most remarkable is how familiar these women seem. Not because Shakespeare anticipated 21st century women, and not just because social mores have been strongly influenced by Shakespeare, but because women and men have not changed all that much since the 16th century. The development of the playwright's skill can be seen in the moral progression of these characters. The nurse, while jolly and loving, is essentially amoral. That was written in 1596. Emilia belatedly becomes the voice of truth and justice. That was written in 1604. Paulina embodies moral righteousness from the start, written in 1609 to 1611. Of these three, Amelia is the most complex, as she demonstrates a gradual self-awakening that is denied to the nurse and that already exists in Paulina. But it is Paulina whom we admire the most, and the nurse who most delights us. None of these characters seem one-dimensional. The richness of Shakespeare's female characters cannot be overstated. Actors who portray them speak of the continual discoveries they have while in character. Reading, performing, or hearing a Shakespeare play challenges all of us in different ways, but chiefly these experiences help us grow in empathy with others, while simultaneously showing us hidden aspects of our own selfhood. The variety of secondary characters, both male and female, that inhabit the tableau of human diversity and show us the face of normality against the extraordinary behavior of larger-than-life personages who in Shakespeare's plays are the principal characters and who in Elizabethan England were royalty and members of the aristocracy. And today, we find in TV, movies, the internet, and politics, all of these secondary characters that Shakespeare creates are like us. For Shakespeare's contemporary, Ben Jonson rightly asserted, he was not of an age, but for all time.